Anybody else with nomination? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations. Don't know what you got yourself into. No, it's good. So now,
Okay, I'll take it over. So you have a stack of papers here in front of you, and I'll go through those. They're in order as we go. The very first is our report of investments for the year of 2019. We invested the majority of our funds with Star Financial Bank through June 30th. On July 1st, we transferred all of those funds through Mutual Bank, and then finally closed our bank on December 31st of 2019. So our closing balances at that time was $7,013,000. We also invested just a little bit with Trust Indiana with Treasury bonds, $1 million. And I will say that we received $105,961 in investment income this year, and that's double from last year. We were at $50,000, so I'm pretty proud of that fact. So if there's no questions on that, we'll move to the next report. The next report is something that you see every year. I give you the prior general fund, debt service, capital projects, transportation, and bus replacement fund balances. And as you know, on January 1 of this year, we transferred those funds into the education. The debt service stayed the same, and then also the operations fund. So if you look then at your next page, this one, the next one, the next sheet, this shows the combined funds so that we can compare apples to apples. So if you look at the very top line where it says 2018 and look at our cash balance, for general fund, it was $3,242,000. And then if you compare all the funds on the next line, which included the capital projects, the CPF, the transportation, the bus, it was $3,414,233. And you compare that today to on December 31st of 2019, that cash balance has grown to $4,130,897.33. If you look at our receipts, they're pretty much the same.
Can I add a statement?
You sure can.
My interpretation of that is that we have recouped by a little over half what we spent on the track, the football and soccer fields in our cash reserves since 2017, which is really good.
Yes, yes, yeah, and also the technology reselling the equipment is in this cash balance also.
But we're gonna have another investment that's coming up for technology, right? Here in the next year. Is that next year when we do technology replacement again?
We'll do the ordering next year, and then we'll actually make the payment the following year.
Okay,
Right,
so
but we have one more payment.
But out of the payments, we recouped $500,000 of that.
So at the end of this school year is when devices will be coming in and then new devices
Not
issued?
the end of this school year, the end of the next school
Okay.
year.
21.
Yeah, 21.
21,
But I think
22.
what she was saying that out of that initial investment, we recouped half of it in resale.
Gotcha.
Which is what our goal was, but you didn't know until you did it. And we were able, to stay current with the technology, and we're able to resell it at a higher value because Apple stays so nice, for years.
I guess what I was just wondering about was wanting to make sure then when we have to make that reinvestment, we'll have a good balance in there to be able to make that reinvestment in devices.
Right, and we have one more payment to make in 2020, and then we should look at making sure that next
Okay.
lease payment stays current, so
Okay.
that we don't lose that lease payment within the education fund. Right.
Are we still working on becoming an Apple school?
We are.
Okay.
We had, not a setback, but our rep, who we absolutely valued in the board, she got moved to a different district. So we're meeting our new representative from Apple in 2 weeks. Not that it slows the process down, but that was a disappointment for us. I think for her also, because we're really close to completing all the requirements and the applications.
Are there any other questions over the good news of the cash balances? The next report is a list of our education and operation fund transfers. As I talk a lot about the 15% rule, and you'll see the total is $2,900,590 grand total, and that equates to 14% of all of our revenue. So we did stay under that 15% in transfers. Now we'll look at the slide, if you don't have any questions over the reports that I've given you. This will be a report on the fiscal and qualitative indicators. And House Enrolled Act 1315 in 2018 established fiscal and qualitative indicators. They established them through a committee under the Distressed Unit Appeal Board. Through public hearings and meetings, the committee developed indicators used to evaluate financial condition of school corporation. And this Distressed Unit Appeal Board is called the DUAB. They reviewed the indicators for each school corporation in early 2019, and the director contacted several corporations to discuss their financial condition based on the indicators I'm about ready to show you. Fortunately, we were not one of those schools, so, and I'm not surprised by that. Indiana Code requires that each public school corporation presents a written report on these indicators for review at a public school board meeting held in January, where the school board convenes as the Board of Finance, beginning January of 2020. So this presentation tonight satisfies this requirement. The first indicator that they will look at is your average daily membership. And you'll see that from 2011, we are pretty consistent in our ADM count. Most of this increase was due to transfer student as our residential enrollment declined. Our peak enrollment was in 2017 with 2,413 students, and the 2019 column reflects ADM of 2,313. This school year we reported an ADM of 2,352. So where it says 2019 there at the end, that's the 2018-19 school year. In September of 2015, we had 1,881 resident students, and in September of 2019, we have 1,619 resident students. So that shows you that even though that our ADM is increasing, a lot of it is due to transfer, not really our own residential kids. Here's our fund balances. You'll notice the blue line every year we increase. That's our general fund, and then the green dot or the green is all the other funds until we got to 2017, and this was the year we updated the football and track facilities. So that should make sense to you. And here is our annual deficit to surplus. Our expenses have consistently stayed balanced with the revenue. And a lot of that has to do with because we negotiate our pay raises based on what our student enrollment is. So you'll see the revenues in the green bar, the expenses are the blue bar, and the yellow, if it's above the line, says we were at a surplus, and if it goes below, that would have been a deficit. And the 2017 year, of course, is when we spent some of our general fund balance, cash balance, so that's why it's below zero. But really the other years we've done pretty well at keeping our revenue above our expenses. And here's our fund balances as a percent of our expenditures. An 8.3% fund balance is 1 month of expenses and is considered an absolute minimum for financial health. DOE, they'll say anywhere between 10 to 15% is good cash balance. I've always liked it at 20 or higher. And you'll see back in 11, 12, 13, we were, 30%. We had really good cash balances. So it made sense at that time that when we wanted to spend some of that cash balance down for the track, and that was a good time to do it. So it did drop to 17%, but we're on our way back up. It was 18, back up to over 18% in 2018, and in 2019 we're back up to over 20% again.
Good.
Yeah. And then here is our tuition support per ADM compared to the general fund expenditures per ADM. So the green bar represents your tuition support per ADM. We always spend more than that. We spend all of our revenue that comes in. So that would represent that yellow bar or the orange bar above it. So we have expended more per student enrollment than we received in tuition support. And here's our revenue by type. This indicator is used to identify trends and any anomalies in revenue sources, and to identify excessive dependence on operating referendum if we had it, which we don't. Revenue for Mississinewa schools for all sources is within expected ranges, and we have no operating referendum revenue. So the brown bar at the top, that would be your federal revenue. The big purple area is our state revenue. Our other local revenue is the purple, and then the salmon color below, that would be our local taxes. So everything stays pretty consistent. Our state tuition has increased a little bit every year. The federal has dipped. That would be your title, your special ed, and school lunch would be in that also. There is no operating referendum revenue, but it is one of the indicators, so I have to show it to you so we have a straight line. And then here is our general fund salaries and benefits as percent of general fund expenditures. It's desirable to maintain salaries and benefits at 90% or below of total general fund expenses. And but for the 2017 year, where we had some capital improvements, we've consistently stayed 80 to 90%. And that's about where we always expect it. The end. Did you have any questions over any of those? No?
Any questions?
So I think everything pretty much tonight has been good news. One thing that's different that we've talked about is the fact that it's changed what we can use each fund for expenses. You saw where in 2017 we had a good cash balance, so we pulled some of that money out for some capital improvements, and you do not have that luxury anymore. Education fund is for classroom expenses only. Our operations fund is tightening up because of the circuit breaker. We're losing we're over $300,000 now in loss. So over the last 4 or 5 years, we've lost well over $1 million there. And then also the amount that I can transfer that they recommend that we transfer from education to operations will be put on a watch list if we're not there. I know some schools use the excuse that they have the high circuit breaker, so they have to transfer more monies. And that's not to say we won't have to use that someday, but that's why I would like at the public meeting in a few minutes to establish the rainy day fund. And I've given you paperwork at your desk too for tonight that shows what that would look like, and also that we had about $680,000 of appropriations in the education fund that we could use to fund that rainy day balance. So you'll hear about that coming up in the next meeting. So
Well, I think it's a good report. I like that you've slowly put money back into our cash balance. I thought that was great. Just didn't make any sense to me to borrow at 3.5% or 4% when we were only making about less than 1% on our money. So I think it's a win-win, even though it may not show up the column. But you figure that kind of money on 3.5%, 4% on $1.7 million. Was that what it was? Ended up being something like that. So I think that was a great job for you. I think you guys snuck it back in there, however you want to put it back in there without, I don't think, because I always thought we should have done that, you know, and then, so, yeah. Anybody else got anything they want to? Mary?
Well, I was just,
You had that look like,
well, the rainy day fund, is that at our discretion to use that, or do we have to get permission if we do need to use it, or how does that work?
Well, what I would be asking you to do tonight is to establish the rainy day
Right,
fund,
I
and then the resolution would state that it could be used for corporation expenses other than salaries and benefits, except for severance and retirement. And if we would need to use it, then I would come back to you at that time to establish the appropriation in the budget. So it's not there to just use as I want to use it. I would need to come back to you and ask permission to use that.
But we don't have to ask the state if we need to use it?
We do not.
Okay.
she brought this up, and Terry wasn't
Oh,
with
that's
us,
right,
But I mean,
yeah.
that's, so she was explaining,
Okay.
go ahead and
Alright.
explain to her that we, the way things are changing, the upkeep in our buildings would be a lot more difficult.
Can I-
Go ahead,
can-
yeah, sure.
Yeah, can I make a comment on that? The state now, they're not penalizing you, at least as of yet, but they have a shame list that they want to post for any school district that spends more than 15% on operations and maintenance of their school district. And we have historically spent 17, 18% on that. And so that 2 or 3% may not sound like much, but it was going to really limit our ability to maintain our facilities in the summertime. We got some big projects that we're committed to that are expensive, like HVAC updates that are in the future that are required really, and our safety issues for our staff at the elementaries. And that's going to continue to be a big expense. We need to start, we have a roofing plan for all 5 buildings that we just started implementing last year in stages for this building first because it's in the worst shape. And, we don't want to deviate from that plan, and parking lots are a constant expense that we've got a long-term plan for. So after we expended what we need to this coming summer for those big projects I just mentioned, we had virtually nothing left. And so this rainy day fund will give us that flexibility to spend that extra 2 or 3% to make sure our buildings are kept up to date. I'm very proud, and I get a lot of compliments, and I'm sure you might hear them too, about our buildings when people go through them that haven't been in them. I took the class of 1969 for a tour of the old high school back in August, and I heard some of those people say, it looks better now than it did back in 1969 when I was here. So, we could afford to skip this summer, but we can't continue to do that. So I think this rainy day fund is crucial to give us that flexibility. So.
Indiana code says that we can transfer up to 10% of unused and unencumbered budget. We have over a $20 million budget, which would give us up to $2 million. But when you look at unused and unencumbered, that was that $680,000 that we had left on the table for the education fund. So,
And if I understand you right, we're spending what we should be spending on education anyway, right? That's what
Yes.
That was even above.
Yeah,
Yeah.
even above that, so we,
correct.
You in your head can give us an idea of how much that is per student, do you know, that we're spending actually?
I think it was around 6,600, something like that.
That's from state tuitions, right?
Yeah, that's mostly from state tuition.
Yeah, that doesn't count special ed or title or
Right.
those kind of things.
anybody else? Any questions? Or you want to adjourn the meeting then, or?
Yeah.
Something else you want to say, anybody?
Well, Terry would adjourn the meeting. Or.
Oh, I'm
you.
sorry.
Or you.
It don't take very long at all to take over power. It's just like that, I was going. No, go ahead.
May I have the gavel?
Madam President, we have a motion.
I need the gavel.
Here, wait a minute. Okay.
I need the gavel.
Can I have a motion for adjournment, please?
I'll make the motion to adjourn, Mrs. President, Madam President.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
Madam Secretary.
Second?
I'll second.
Meeting is adjourned.
All right.
Good job,
You're
Terry.
lucky I gave it back.
Don't post this, okay, whatever you do. We won't always have this much fun, okay? Sometimes it's work. That's a good report. Who would like to do prayer thing? Terry,
Sure.
you've been going, you go ahead.
Surely not skiing or.